Hello and welcome to an all-new Marvelcast, Explosion Network's hub of all things Marvel, a place to talk about everything MCU and beyond, from Avengers and Defenders to Yitz Perlman and Bast. My name's Ashley Hobler, the Explosion Network's podcast host with multiple personalities, and joining me today is Ultimate Ciaran Marchant.
Hey, it's I, the guy that gets the names wrong.
And also joining us, the astonishing Dylan Blight.
Did you check the comic book characters I listed off last week, and had you already mentioned them, or?
No. I have a feeling maybe you mentioned them last time you guys.
That would be hilarious if I did, because I just clicked the random generator thing again, so...
Damn, that's insane if they're the same again.
Yeah.
That is,
so.
It's a bit awkward
because you said Nico something from Runaways, I'm pretty sure.
I'm
pretty sure you've said that before, so...
I don't know. I clicked random, that's all I got.
That's like a task I'm going to have to get around to one day, just knock in, put a comprehensive list together.
Wait, you don't already do that?
No.
Dylan was swearing me black and blue you'd already done that.
I did for like the first 25. And then
oh, when we were doing the rewatch, when it was like nice and simple and like... Yeah, okay.
I was like, crap. Let's do so many. Alright. Today we're talking about the 5th episode of Moon Knight, Asylum. Directed by Mohamed Diab. Written by Rebecca Kirsch and Matthew Orton. Marc and Steven search through their memories to find their truth or become left behind. Ciaran, do you remember like a couple weeks ago, I'm pretty sure, I said, hey, you know what will probably happen? Episode 5. We're going to have like a flashback episode that explains everything.
I do remember this. I was thinking about this while I was sat down.
We kind of had that episode this week.
We did get that this episode. You know what? I'm actually pretty positive about this episode overall. I had probably pretty big problems. And I feel like I was an outlier in the end. Like, Dylan and me were outliers in terms of, I guess, the general public view of the episode last week.
I feel like there's a lot of love for this show.
Yeah. Like there is... It's... Yeah.
And I feel it's because people have not watched enough shows.
Yeah. Because I was like... I kept seeing like 8s and 9s for people who score freaking episodes by themselves. It's like... I'm like, oh, okay, this is...
Hey, we do that sometimes, motherfucker.
But no, I think this episode was a step in the right direction. I think having the chance to kind of explore and go through Mark's life, and it's pretty obvious. I think I had said it pretty early that I don't think Steven had had existed for that long, or existed for... wasn't the original. I thought, I have my questionable, I've had a minimal distaste for Steven as a character throughout this series so far.
You hated him.
Yeah, I did. And there were points definitely in this episode again, I was like, dude, what the fuck is going on? But at the same time, I do understand and I like the kind of Steven going through the shock reality of understanding that he isn't the original, and he isn't doesn't have kind of any control, or doesn't, he was made to protect Mark when he was a kid. Like, I think that was something definitely more signposted at the end of last week's episode, where there was the Stephen Grant movie kind of scene that we were shown before flicking into the asylum. I will say the flicking between the mental hospital and the stuff going on with exploring the memories, still super fucking confused about. Like, and there wasn't even an inkling that I was starting to make sense of what actually is going on there.
I mean, it could still be real. Like,
yeah,
this series potentially could end with, hey, he's in that mental hospital.
Yes.
This was all a dream.
I feel like there's some weird not timeline things, but there's like some things that they pointed out, like in one of the scenes in the mental hospital, he has like the banged up, and I think it's like in the opening kind of scene there, he's got like the banged up and cut nose and everything, and visible kind of trauma to his face, and then in later scenes in the mental hospital, he doesn't have any of that, and he's quite okay.
It could just be because time's passed.
It could just be. I don't know. It's a very strange way of doing it with no inclination.
It also could be like
movement.
Signs that it isn't real.
Yes, exactly. I think the ending and overall I appreciated. I'm still confused about if there's going to be a third persona, and I'm now starting to lean that no, there can't be a third persona. It like almost makes like I don't know. This is my biggest problem. Is that next episode is what? Was this episode 4 or 5? This was 5.
Right? So next week
There's
is
one
the
episode
finale.
left.
So next week's the finale. I feel like once again with these short run series, we're getting to the final episode, and it's like, what the fuck? How do they close this? There's still so much that I feel needs to be.
He literally needs to beat a god.
It's there's so much that still needs to be done. There needs to be, either wrapping up and acknowledging that Steven did die and Steven is gone, or bringing Steven back, and then we've had the hint at we saw the third sarcophagus at the end of last week's episode, and we've had moments throughout the show where it seems that not even Marc was involved in the section where people were brutally murdered. So it's like that doesn't seem like a Steven thing. So. I don't know. I feel like there is a lot to do for this show still, with only one episode remaining.
Yeah, I think there's potential for there being a third personality. I'll tell a bit in a bit. Dylan, what do you think of this week's episode?
Yeah, I mean, when they started doing the whole penultimate, let's just do a whole bunch of flashbacks, I was like, oh god. Just fucking, it's TV writing 101 now over here, isn't it? Let's just do the flashback episode. I feel like we finally got to what I've sort of been looking for in this episode a bit, but then with one episode left, I'm like, cool. So like, I guess that's just like, let's just get through that and move on to the other stuff. I think ultimately what I've come to realize is the stuff I'm most interested in the show isn't. So the focus of the show has been the gods, Egyptian gods, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas I think the more interesting story is sort of what's on showcase here that we're just getting one episode of, and because it's like rushes through it and has to get it all done in this episode, or primarily all done in this episode, so we can go back to fighting Ethan Hawke next week and getting Khonshu back and whatever else. It's like okay, well that's probably the most of that we're going to get, but. I feel like if you ever like any reading or like watching anything about DID, it's always like it's triggered by like a big traumatic event, and they the creation of the like everything in here adds up as far as like what I know. The little I know about DID is like it's big traumatic event. And they show that in here where he goes through this thing where he unfortunately is. Put to blame for the death of his brother, especially hard by his mother, who begins bullying him, abusing him, and thus you get the creation of this other personality, which becomes like a protective shell for himself. Like all of that, I think is super interesting. Obviously, it's a dark story. Not saying like it's a happy thing to go through, but that's probably what I wish we had more time to explore. And as much as I'm like, this is all making for an interesting character and everything, like now we're back to the bloody the ship and the bloody hippo and all this. Like all of that, I'm at this point, having been shown what I think could have been a much more interesting show. I'm not super pumped to come into the last episode, to be completely honest.
I do think that the Egyptian stuff this week, I think, is the best the Egyptian stuff has been throughout the entire series. I think they have half-assed a lot of the Egyptian stuff, especially with the gods. Especially around the gods and I guess the two major scenes we've seen the gods in isn't the actual gods. The only gods we've really seen the kind of the... when we've seen the gods, they've been in these kind of human protagonists, like not protagonists, but human avatars, and they just do a really shit job of portraying what kind of god they are, giving the god any kind of personality. I think at least in this episode, there is a lot more of a mystical aspect to the gods and kind of bringing a lot of Egyptian mythology kind of more forefront to this episode. With the scales, and I think a lot of people know of Egyptian mythology around death and kind of having to weigh your heart against the feather in terms of trying to see if you're worthy of the afterlife. I just, it just feels a little bit like, damn, you had all this good stuff here in this fifth episode. Why couldn't we have this a bit more spread out and a bit more kind of fleshed out? I will say, I had a massive nerd moment for his kind of first initial transformation into Moon Knight. I thought,
did you finally like the suit?
I did in that scene, and in that context, and with like the narration of "You will be my new Moon Knight" and shit. I was like, dude, this is fucking hype. This is some cool shit. This is exactly what this kind of thing is, and it makes me kind of actually excited for when we. I'm not excited about Moon Knight's own story, but I'm interested in the potential of Moon Knight being a part of other Marvel stories.
It's gonna be part of Illuminati. It's all linked together.
We'll talk about it next week.
Like it's yeah. No, I feel like I'm excited for that character and the Moon Knight hero to be in other things. Just not that much of a fan of how they've rolled out his first adventure series introduction.
Yeah, I like the episode. Although I think I enjoy stories in which characters go back and like explore their past in like weird and wacky ways.
Weird and wacky ways. Do you mean the unique way of a corridor filled with doors, and behind each door is a different memory?
Can I just say quickly so this episode does feel very similar to WandaVision, right? So the penultimate one, very thing. I think the reason I like WandaVision a lot more than this is because WandaVision felt like it was more focused, even though that's a show that feels utterly unfocused because it's fucking random and you don't know what's going on for half the time. But I feel like I feel like the theme just was more balanced. If we're going off everything's balanced, that was more balanced. And then by the time it gets to that episode, it doesn't feel as much of a shit. We got to rush through this or whatever. It just felt a little bit more like we got to that this reveal and this point naturally. Whereas this episode feels like fuck. Like let's just get all this done in this episode. Rush, like corridor of flashbacks.
But I mean, this episode is a corridor. The purpose of this episode was to explain where Steven came from.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like because at least WandaVision had 3 extra episodes, so it had more time where it banked those initial 3 episodes of going off the wall crazy with like very mysterious, weird kind of.
It did also have like an extended cast.
Yes, exactly. Whereas I think Moon Knight is I don't know. I feel like it's not had like. There's almost been too much moving around within the episodes that hasn't developed Steven very well as a character, and it hasn't developed Marc as a character very well, and it hasn't developed their relationship together. Like, Steven always feels like... I feel like whenever Steven has control of the body, or even in this, like, literally, when he's, like, running through into memories and locking Marc out of memories... It makes Steven feel like an annoying little brother with a TV remote, that he's finally got the TV remote and he's going to run away with it.
He's just trying to learn the truth, Ciaran.
I feel like there is... I don't know, there's just very little kind of willing to understand Marc. And there's very little willing to try and talk with Marc about anything that's going on.
That's because he's been lied to constantly and had his body taken off. I mean... You know, I'm going to defend Steven. You know, I think he's solid, and you know he goes out like a hero. But yeah, I think I will say Oscar Isaac gave an excellent performance in this, especially when it revealed the breaking point of his whole personality was when his mother died, and like him unable to hold both sides of himself apart. I mean, that scene where, you know, he's at Steven and Arthur's calling his mother, apparently, on the phone. Like, man, Oscar Isaac's really good at acting. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. So, you know, and then at the end, Steven dies. It looks like falls into the sands, never to be seen before again. And then, you know, his body, his heart is balanced, and Marc is able to go to the afterlife, which, let's be honest, looks pretty boring.
Just a bloody forest? Field,
It's like a-
No, it's a field
Just a
of
bunch of
rye.
reeds?
It's a field
like,
of
why?
reeds. Because that's the description of the afterlife for the
Egyptians,
Egyptian mythology. Is very much that. And, if I don't get a gladiator shot of Oscar Isaac's hand going through the reeds, it's just
Missed opportunity.
missed opportunity. Exactly, 100%.
All right. Anything else we feel like we need to discuss from this episode?
How do we feel about the hippo after last week? Also, I do find it very funny when Ethan Hawke keeps calling it a rhino or whatever, and it's just like mother's like hippo.
It's a Barnabas. I think it was great. I think it was very well brought to life. You know what I mean?
I do feel like they got the balance of comedy in this episode right. Like, I feel like it's a very dark episode. It's a very kind of heavy episode, but there is good comedic relief throughout the scenes. I feel like every now and then Moon Knight has shit the bed a little bit with its comedy. So to find its balance is really good, and I did. And the thing is, I liked the hippo because it's nice to have her character as her as a god actually in her god form and having a bit more personality and kind of character to her. That you can
she
actually,
felt like someone on the first day of the job. So
yeah, I know, but yeah.
but she's a god and probably been done this.
Ripped out the hearts and was like, "Oh, thought I was going to blow you up."
Yep.
And then when the stuff doesn't weigh properly, she's like, "Oh, I don't have a card for this."
Yeah.
Like-
I think the unsettling thing about her is she has human hands.
Does she? I never noticed.
But that's the thing. All of the
All the gods are like
all the
human,
Egyptian gods.
Yeah.
but animal from
They're
the
like-
top.
the god animals or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, just seeing the hands with like hippo skin. It looked weird. So what are our expectations for next week's episode? Listen, I think there's for sure a third personality.
There definitely is. So the one, so
Because,
other than seeing
listen-
the third sarcophagus, there's the thing in, I think it's episode 2 where he's about to kill all those goons on the roof.
Yes.
And then he blacks out
Yes.
or whatever. And then Steven comes back and he's like really pissed off. And then they black out again and then they're out in the middle of nowhere and they're all dead. And then Steven blames it all on Mark, but Mark says he didn't do it.
So my prediction is this third personality is the one that actually took the beatings. And is like full hate driven.
Well, yeah, so that would make sense because
Steven doesn't hate his mum, even though
Steven
last
doesn't
we
hate
see
his mum.
he's about to be beaten as Steven.
Yeah, so
Unless he
I
turns
feel
back
like
to
that
Mark.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you have a scenario where Mark is under so much distress that causes him to create Steven, and then Steven's under to protect himself creates this other personality.
Well, the thing that it seemed to insinuate is just Steven was just either oblivious or just that personality of Steven blocked out all that stuff from his mum. That, when he first changed into Steven, it was like he couldn't hear his mum banging on the door and yelling at him and trying to get his attention. He was just like, oh, fuck, I gotta pick up these pens. Mum's gonna be pissed. These are her favourite pens. And started, putting them away and seemed to be oblivious to the oncoming danger that was in the form of their mother.
I'm going to say the third personality is not out often.
No. I think
I'm going to say it's
that
very rare.
that sequence, and I have a feeling that they were involved in that Egyptian massacre.
Yeah. But, so the other thing is, after we learn about Mark, anytime they switched, the camera stayed with, but prior to that it kept doing that whole effect when he was switching before we learned who Mark was, whereas that time it happens in episode 2 after we already knew who Mark and Steven were. It does affect, but we it hadn't been doing that when they switched because we knew who the characters were. So yeah.
Any other predictions, or is he just going to live in the land in the afterlife?
No, he'll escape.
He'll come back,
and get Khonshu back and end the show sitting on a fucking tower looking by Batman, going to protect the city or some shit. I don't know. Fucking know. Fuck if I know.
Yeah. I think, it'll all get wrapped up really quickly.
Yeah.
Stupidly
Ethan
quickly.
Hawke doesn't balance. Ethan Hawke gets balanced and doesn't balance and he dies. Or
Or
something.
the whoever the god, because it seems like the god's been released, right?
They like
I think so, yeah.
All the
they.
you're seeing all the bodies like dying before
Mhm.
they've been balanced or whatever. So.
He like Chinese finger traps his hands together and like makes him judge himself, and then he dies.
I think he probably balanced him before, like he gave him the power. I would assume.
I don't know. I think the god seems very hypocritical, so I don't think they would balance themselves, because how would they in fact be balanced?
That's a good question. Let us know what you thought of this week's episode of Moon Knight by going to explosion.com/Twitter or jump to Discord at explosion.com/Discord. If you want to help us out here at All New Marvelcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Podchaser, or tell people about the show, or leave us 5 stars. Anyway, you can leave 5 stars. And if you've been enjoying these Moon Knight recaps, I think they're worth $1. Head on over to the Ko-fi page at explosion.com/support. So next week, Doctor Strange comes out. We're all watching Doctor Strange Wednesday night when Moon Knight normally airs. Ciaran, that's what we're doing. So, odds are the next episode of Moon Knight will be late. But make sure you watch that last episode of Moon Knight and join us next time for another all-new Marvelcast.